Card Kings, here I come. Hello, sports fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com. Your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program a former Major League first baseman who played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, Los Angeles Dodgers, Baltimore Orioles, Kansas City Athletics, Houston Astros, and the Cleveland Indians from 1957 to 1966. We welcome in the great Diamond Jim Gentile. Jim, Brian C., honored to have you.
Oh, I'm happy to talk to you, Brian. How you doing out there?
Oh, everything's great, and a big fan of you and your cards. So really, it's an honor for me. I want to start, Jim. Early 1950s, you're 18 years old, and you get signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers. Take us back to that time in your life. How you were signed? Where were you? What do you recall about that day in your life?
Well, it was the night before I went out with the Yankees, and
wow.
And we went to dinner, my mother and I, and they offered. I'm laughing about it because they offered me $5,000. I just pitched the game 2 nights before All-Star game, struck out 17, and I'm not even a pitcher. I wanted to play first base, but they offered me $5,000, and my mother didn't know anything about baseball, and she said, "Do you want Jim or his brother, who's 1 year old?" so I went home, and we're sitting there. They called back 10 minutes later, and they offered me $15,000.
Wow.
Yes, my mother said, "What were you going to?" Patty Cottrell was the scout, and my mom said, "What were you going to do with that $10,000 you didn't offer my son? Were you going to buy a car?" She said, "I'll tell you one thing, my son will never be a Yankee," and she hung up.
Really?
I just sat there and going, "Oh, Mom, you don't do that." I don't care. They don't try to bluff me. But the Red Sox called, and they offered me $25 as a pitcher. They didn't want me as a hitter. They said no one hits them out of Boston but Ted Williams.
Wow.
Yeah, he said, because they have the fairly short left field fence, but you got to get up in the air. Well, anyway, then I talked to the Phillies, and they came with the same. But then the Dodgers came in, and they offered me $30 and $400 a month with a Double-A contract, and if I get a big league contract, I get another $7,500. So, and my high school coach was a bird dog for the Dodgers.
Oh, was he?
Well, it was like a bird dog. If he saw a good player, he would tell the Brooklyn scout and Bill Brenzel. And so, I don't know, I sort of leaned toward them. I didn't know anything about the big leagues. I didn't know they had Gil Hodges, and he was young. So, stupid. I didn't know that once you signed a contract with Brooklyn, you were stuck with them for life.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, you were brought in by the Dodgers, a team who had Gil Hodges, and you didn't even know about Gil Hodges, huh?
No, I knew the Coast League. I knew everything about the Coast League, San Francisco Seals and Sacramento and Hollywood. That's what I followed. The only time I saw anything about the big leagues was when the World Series, and it came out in the paper. I didn't pay much attention to it. I wish I would have, because and I wish we would have had an agent back then.
Well, going through your stats, your first, in 1954, you were playing at Pueblo with the Dodgers, a team that had Sparky Anderson, Roger Craig. And, you put up some heavy numbers, Jim, that year in 54. You batted .314, drove in 109 RBIs. How were you seeing pitching? Apparently, you were seeing pitching well. You were hitting the ball very solidly that year, 1954.
Well, 53 is my first year at Pueblo. Mm-hmm. I was 18 years old, and they said I would only be there for about 27 days, and then when the cutdowns come, they'd send me out to California. Well, I just started hitting good. I finished the season hitting 270, and I led the league in home runs, 34, and I drove in 103. And the next year I started at Mobile. I was leading the Southern Association after 27 games with 8 home runs. And Wozniak calls me in the office and says, I don't think you can do that all year, so I'm going to take Norm Larker. And I went back to Pueblo for 54.
Amazing. And just wait till we get to 1961, which is incredible. So you were always known to be a powerful left-handed hitter. I mean, you were 6'4", back then, 215 pounds. Now, your first recollection, your first pro game at Ebbets Field, I believe it was September 24th, 1957 against the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think you batted twice in that game. Do you recall your first pro at bat?
No, my very first pro was in 1956 in Chicago. I pinched hit for Colfax.
Oh,
but I had such a bad pulled groin, they sent me home. I was only there one day, and they said I had to go home and take care of my leg if I wanted to go to Japan on that trip the Dodgers were going on. So that's what I went home, and then I went on the trip with the Dodgers to Japan, and I led the club and everything. And Buzzy Bavesi says to me, well, you hit 40 home runs in the Texas League that year. He said, we're going to move Hodges to third and put you on first and see how it goes. Never happened.
So how did you get along with the other Brooklyn Dodgers? People like Sandy Koufax, Pee Wee Reese. Did you get along with them?
Oh, yeah. I used to drive to spring training with Drysdale. He's in Southern California, and I would take the flight down to L.A. He'd meet me at the airport, and we'd take off and drive to Vero Beach. So, no, I had no problem. And the one Dodger that, he gave me my nickname, Diamond Jim, Roy Campanella.
Right.
You know,
in 1957, I think that was Campy's last year.
Yeah. Well, we went to Japan, and I went out to dinner with him and Newcomb and some of the guys quite a few times, and he just told me, he said, you just got to be ready when your time comes. He said, I know you're having a tough time. He was very nice, you know. He said, I know you're having a tough time, but I'm telling you, you're going to get a shot, and you better be ready. And I had to wait 7 years. My first time up at Ebbets Field was 1957, but was against the Philadelphia Phillies. And Robin Roberts was pitching. And my second time up in the big leagues, I hit a home run off Roberts over the upper deck facing in center field at Ebbets Field.
And that September 24, 57, that's an historic game. I believe that was the last game played at Ebbets Field, which you were part of that lineup. Do you recall that historic game?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I know a lot of people ask me about how did you feel? Well, to me, it was just another game. But to Campanella and Hodges and the regular Dodgers who'd been there for 10, 12 years or maybe more, it was quite a thing, you know, moving from their family and everything out to California. So to me, it was just another game. I was happy to play.
No, absolutely. And then let's fast forward a little bit to 1960. 60 comes along. You traded to Baltimore Orioles. I believe the GM at the time was
Brian. I was given they trade me to the Orioles on just a 30-day look. They didn't really want to get rid of me. They had 30 days to look at me. If Richards didn't like what he saw, he returns me back to the Dodgers with $25,000.
Amazing. And the GM was Lee McPhail, and you mentioned manager Paul Richards. So how was the transition for you? You know, you're leaving Brooklyn over to Baltimore.
Oh, I wasn't really in Brooklyn. It was different. I really didn't know anybody but Brooks Robinson. I played against him back in '56 when he was with San Antonio. And as I walked in the clubhouse, he said to me, he said, "Where you been? Been waiting 4 years for you." But my biggest worry was I went to Panama in '59 after the season from St. Paul, and I got a bone chip in my ankle, and they put me in a cast. And here I am supposed to go to spring training with the Baltimore Orioles, and I've got a cast on, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I got the cast off about a week before I went to spring training, and it seemed to be okay. But when I went there was Walt Dropel, Bobby Boyd, John Powers from Pittsburgh, and a young, strong-looking boy named Boog Powell, and me. 5 of us over there with a first baseman's glove.
Wow.
You know, so we didn't get to play much. I mean, Boog might start a game, play 5 innings, I'd play 4, and Dropel would play, and Bobby Boyd. I just didn't think I had a chance. They had 30 days. They were just going to, in the spring training, they'd send me back. But in the spring training, he called me in the office, and he was standing up, and he just looked over his shoulder, and he said, "Son, you can't be as bad as you look." He said, "You've got plenty of power." He said, "I see here on the stats." He said, "I need power on my first base." So he said, "I'm going to take you to Baltimore, and I'm going to give you about 27 games. And if you hit, you're my first baseman. If you don't hit, you're going back to the Dodgers." And it just turned out. I played against right-handers, and Walt Dropel played against left-handers the first year.
But, Jim, 1960, wasn't that your first year in the All-Star game?
Yes. I made it. Well, I made the All-Star team along with Ron Hansen and I think Chuck Estrada and Boog, or not Boog, but Brooks, pardon me. But the thing is, you know, I was brought in, so we got down to the last 3 games, and I had 98 ribbies, and all the newspaper guys on Baltimore come and said, "Boy, if you drive in 100, I'll vote for you for Rookie of the Year." And they said, "Why don't you go in and tell Paul Richards you got 98 ribbies, you'd like a chance at 100? And back then, the manager was, you know, the boss. I said, "No, I'm not going in to tell Paul Richards." He kept me. I said, "If he wants me to play, I'll play." Well, I didn't play. I played 1 game out of 3. And I drove in 98. And Ron Hansen, a shortstop, who had a great year, hit 21 homers, drove in 80-some-odd runs. That doesn't happen. It happens more nowadays, but back then, a shortstop doing that was something. And he made the All-Star team, and he got Rookie of the Year, which he definitely deserved. But if I would have drove in 100 runs, I might have got more votes.
We're talking with Jim Gentile of the Baltimore Orioles. And, Jim, you know, we got to mention 1961, a truly historic year for you. I mean, you held a record for over a quarter of a century. You belted 5 grand slams in 1961 with an explosion of RBIs, 141 in the 61 season. I mean, that year, what were you doing differently that year?
Nothing. I just was relaxed. And now, seeing I got to stay in the big leagues 1 year, and I was just relaxed. And I know a lot of people say on account of adding 2 new teams, the pitching was down. And excuse me. And I always went along with it and didn't say anything. I never thought it was easy to hit the ball, no matter who was pitching. But I finally got a baseball card, the 1961 home run leaders, and I looked at it and I thought, "Look at this! Nobody hit 30 home runs." I said, if it was so easy, these guys who hit 20, Bobby Allison and the guys like that hit 29 every year, should have been in the 30s. Nobody hit 30s in 1961. Just because the 5 of us hit over 40, they acted like it was the pitching was really terrible. But I have a friend in Baltimore calls me all the time. he looked it up. Out of my 46 home runs, I only hit 5 off guys who hadn't pitched in the big league. Doesn't matter. I mean, it's just something that you start to think about.
I mean, and not to mention, this is another incredible stat. You became the 4th player to hit 2 Grand Slam home runs in the same game, and the first to hit them on consecutive at-bats. I mean, that's tremendous.
And the funny thing is, Brian, they were on consecutive pitches. I hit the home run off Pasquale. The next inning, bases got loaded again. They brought in Paul Gill, the ex-Minnesota football player. In the first pitch he threw me, I hit out. So they were on consecutive pitches also.
Well, I think it was like 8 RBIs
yes.
that you accumulated.
Yeah, they said it was a record.
In 2 consecutive innings.
And I got up in the 9th inning with the bases low, and I hit a sacrifice fly. So you don't usually get, really, the bases loaded to get up 3 times in one game is something. Maybe you can go the whole season and only get up 3 or 4 times with the bases loaded. But the 61, we had a heck of a club. The young guys were running all the time, and hitting 4th, I got up quite a few times with the bases loaded.
And like I mentioned, it was a record 5 Grand Slams in one season, a record you held for 26 years. I think Mattingly broke it in '87, but still, you held that record for like 26 years.
Yeah, well, records are meant to be broken. I was happy. I didn't think much of it. I was just worried about the next year.
Right, and when we were speaking last week, Jim, you mentioned something about Roger Maris, because that was, everyone knows 61 was Maris's year. But now, do you feel that your record was overshadowed by what was going on with Roger Maris?
Oh, and Mantle. The M&M boys, and Killebrew and I and the rest of the guys, we were definitely overshadowed because of the Babe Ruth record, and that's fine. That's like I told you, Barris, Killebrew, and I went on down south on 5 different places and for just took batting practice for people. But the tobacco farmer down there, he said there's only one Saturday game. He said so people don't see it. So he brought us in, and we went to Wilson, Raleigh, Durham, Reynolds. We went 5 different towns for the guy, and all we did is Clyde King pitched and Jack McKeon pitched to us, and we'd hit 20 pitches, and then we stop and sign autographs and hit another 20, and then that was it.
Yeah, I mean, and that 61, your 141 RBIs in 61 was second to, Roger Maris, right? 142.
No, he only had 141.
Oh, he only had 141. I don't know why some of the record books have him at 142. Can you explain that a little bit?
No. Well, I don't know what record book. I got the big green one here, and I opened it up and got us at 141 because they changed it. They gave him an RBI where he shouldn't have got it.
That's right. It was incorrectly credited, right? I think it was a game July 5th, 1961. He reached on base by an error. That's right.
Yeah, so that whoever it is, I can't remember the name of the company that follows that.
No, that's right. So you and Maris were tied, right?
Yeah.
Originally, they had Maris at 142, but he got on base by an error. So you and him were tied that season.
Yeah, this sports writer from Chicago went through every game, and he came across this where Maris hit a single, and the runner was going to third, Kubek. They threw to get him, but Bubba Phillips cut it off because Maris took a big turnaround first, and he threw it in the stands. And then Kubek got to come in. And a sports writer who was the scorer that day gave Maris an RBI on that. It shouldn't have been. So they changed it.
Right, right. So then 64 comes along, 1964, and you go to the Athletics. How was your experience there?
It was all right. Charlie Finley was okay. It's just that every time somebody did good, they got traded to the Yankees. Not me, but he brought in Colavito and me for power, and Rocky had a great year, hitting 34 and drove in 100 runs. I hit 28, but he drove in everybody. I kept telling him, quit driving in the runs ahead of me. He was in third. I said, like a shot at it. I drove in 70 some odd, but I hit 28. I had to deal with Finley. For every home run I hit over 27, he gave me $1,000. And what he called, there's another incident where I had 27, and there was about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't play much.
It's interesting because you played with Rocky Colavito also with the Cleveland Indians, if I'm not mistaken, right? In 1966?
Yeah. Yes.
Huh. But then before that, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say we roomed together, and it was a great year. I mean, but it was just the idea that when everybody on the club hit, the pitching wasn't good. When the pitching was good, we didn't hit. If you look up Kansas City's record, the 10 years they were there, they never finished less than 35 and a half games out. That's when we had 8 teams.
And then 65, you joined the Houston Astros, playing with Nellie Fox, Rusty Staub. I believe Maloney was on that squad. How was your experience there going to the Dome?
Well, never failed. I always seem to go places where the parks are huge, and you had to hit it up in the upper deck in Houston at first. Now they've changed it around, but the thing was that the manager there now, I forgot his name, that managed when I got there. Well, Paul was there, and then Paul left. But the next year when I went there, the guy came up from Oklahoma City, managed Oklahoma City, and he came up, and that's when Morgan and Wynn and the shortstop and the catcher, they all came with him, and Chuck Harrison, a good player. But he told me right out.
Manager Lum Harris? Manager Harris,
no,
was he the manager?
No. If I heard the name, I'd remember it because he suspended me.
Oh, anyway, really? What happened there?
Well, he sent me up to pinch hit at home in about the bottom of the 8th, and I was facing my old roommate, Billy Heft. And 3-2, I took a change up inside. I thought umpire called me a strike. As I walked away, home plate was only about 20 feet from the stand. As I walked away, I just flipped it behind me, and Vargo walked that way. If he would have walked toward third, nothing would have happened, but he walked toward first, and the bat was sliding on the ground, so he threw me out. He said, I threw the bat at him. I ran up the home plate, and I said, I didn't throw the bat at you. I flipped it behind me. I said, I'll take that, but don't say it. Then he kept saying, you threw the bat at me. Well, Aspermani came up, and he still had his bat in his hand. And stupid me, I grabbed the bat, and I said, you think I threw that one? I grabbed Aspermani's bat, and I slammed it down. Instead of hitting the dirt, it hit the plate, bounced up, and hit Vargo in the shoulder. And so I got suspended for a week.
Yeah, because, I think the manager in 64, 65 was Luman Harris, and then in 66 was Grady Hatton, I believe.
That's it, Grady Hatton, yeah. He told me the day I walked in a spring training, he didn't want me. Just right out, said, I didn't want you. I said, well, then trade me. All my life, every time all I get is nobody wants you. I should be used to it by now.
So 1966 comes along, Jim, and you retired. Now, did you retire in 66 or early 67?
Well, what happened is Cleveland bought me, because when I got suspended, they sent me down to Oklahoma City, and I was there for 27 games. I hit 9 home runs, so Cleveland bought me, Bertie Tebbetts. He brought me in the office, and he said, now, I'm going to train you to be a pinch hitter. Said, we need a good left-handed pinch hitter. He said, if you remember George Crowe with Cincinnati, he said, I turned him into an outstanding pinch hitter. I said, fine, I'll be glad to try. Well, he was there a week after I got there, and he retired. He quit. And George Strickland took over. And I didn't play much. I pinched hit, and every once in a while he put me in there. But other than that, I didn't play much at all, and I didn't hit much of all. So they sold me. The Phillies bought me in the winter of 60. What was that? 67. Yeah, So I go over to the Phillies, and not being smart, I go there without a contract. Instead of getting a minor league contract, knowing what I'm going, like they do now, and knowing what I'm going to make, I go to spring training, break my back trying to thinking I'm going to make the club because Bill White had ruptured his Achilles playing squash. Last day of spring training, Mock comes up and says, I'm not going to take you with me. I'm going to take an extra pitcher. I said, well, where do I go? He said, I think your contract, they told me to tell you to go out to San Diego, the Coast League. So I see the owner or the general manager. I can't remember his name either. But
and I have about 15 seconds left, Jim. I'm sorry. I have about 15 seconds.
All right, let it go. It's no big deal. I went out to Coast League for 2 years. Then I went to Japan for 1, and that was it.
And do you still enjoy watching the games very quickly? Do you still enjoy watching baseball?
No, I don't watch it. It's different. Well, every decade is different. And I just can't see when you're 15 games out and a guy hits a home run jumping up and down, and I don't know. It's just different. It's just different.
Well, Jim, this was really an honor. It was a pleasure. Really pleasure to have you. I really appreciate your time.
Well, Brian, thank you very much. I wish I could have told you more.
Maybe a part 2. We'll speak
That's
again.
right.
We'll speak soon.
All right, bud. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Jim Gentile. Until next week, happy collecting to all.